Alrighty, today we're going to talk about how I actually make money vibe coding. Now, first thing you got to know is that vibe coding alone didn't make me money. What does make me money is actually solving problems that businesses or companies have. So in itself, if it's just vibe coding, it's not going to be enough. I've joined, some Facebook groups, I've seen stuff on Reddit. There is an exploding popularity with vibe coding, and there are so many people out there jumping on all these platforms, building web apps or phone apps of their dreams. And that's all well and great. I think the barrier to entry for, creating these sorts of things has definitely shrunk. It's definitely much easier. Granted, a full stack dev traditionally will always be superior. You'll always make a better product as a full stack dev, but at the same time, there is a gap in the market at the moment where you can get good enough results, doing some vibe coding and generating some cool stuff, like portal front ends or even apps. Like there's so many things that you can do. But the problem is a lot of people out there are creating all these apps and then, like asking people to test it out, and they're spending all this money. They're putting all this AI into it and they're just burning cash left, right and center. And they're sort of like creating all these things, but not even knowing if it works for the market or not even knowing who to sell it to. So the problem is not necessarily vibe coding. That's all well and great. But if you don't have any business sense or you don't even have a target market, then, you're in a little bit of trouble because fortunately for me, it was business first and then, vibe coding came out later. So the last, I would say 5-6 years, I've been doing a lot of project management stuff. And that sort of expanded into, developing Monday.com accounts for people. Monday.com is generally like, a glorified Excel spreadsheet. So I'll do a screen share and I'll show you. It's been a while since I've done a screen share. So essentially, like this is the layout, right? This is coming from the academy. So it's one of my academy boards, which is fine to show you. But essentially, it's very familiar to Excel. The only difference is you get like a UI, you get automations, integrations. No, let's open this and see. Like Excel, you don't get this sort of user interface, when priority changes to critical, notify do. I mean, you can sort of build it out, and it can tap into Zapier and you can do a lot more. But everything is generally here already. And typically, not so much these days, but I used to sort of push a lot of my clients into actually using Monday because it has so many default integrations and it's easy for them to use as well. So I'm not necessarily putting them in a situation where it's like, oh, they always got to call me to get things fixed. I put them into sort of environments where it's like, if you want to dive in and, you want to learn a little bit, then you can actually build basic automation. So again, what I do now, literally, yes, it's project management, but not as a whole. Like that's just one sort of factor, one segment. But in essence, I build workflows for companies. So it doesn't matter if it's in marketing, sales, whatever, right? Any department, for any really type of industry. But I guess for me, it's sort of like I find what fits me best is, I'm able to connect with these clients on a level where, I can speak to the C-suite, I can speak to the CEO, the founders and all that stuff. Like I get along with them very well. And I would say that is more of a trait for me, more of a benefit for me, when it comes to the sales process, because it's like I'm talking to their peers, right? I'm talking to someone on their level who's dealt with, like enterprise level systems. So I find that is a benefit for me. Granted, that comes in my background. So it's not as easy as you think. Like, yes, you can vibe code, the most beautiful thing in the world, but if you don't have any sales, any marketing, or, you can't talk the talk, so to speak, if I were to simplify things, right? It's going to be a little bit hard, especially, if you're someone that hasn't really gotten out there, you don't really socialize in a business sense, right? Or you're not able to, connect the dots with people at a higher level, then it's going to be a little bit hard. For me, And what I do, what I used to do, what I still do now, it's primarily high ticket, low volume. So I look for enterprise businesses within specific industries around HVAC, construction, legal. Essentially, you know, the key is to my business, which I'll reveal to you, is finding businesses that obviously generate a lot of revenue, right? So they do have the money for me to charge like mid-market rates, like to the lower end of mid-market rates, who understand technology, understand what it can do, but don't necessarily want to build it or don't necessarily want to learn, but they understand what it can do. So sort of like, think of your tradie, you know, on the job, you know, they're as anti-tech as possible, right? But at the same time, they've got an iPhone in their pocket. This is like the target sort of avatar, the target type of person that I'm looking for, but obviously the business owner version, right? Where they understand that if they invest into systems, you know, it will be immense for their business because it just fundamentally changes everything. Like imagine, like the best customer for me, imagine if I were to paint the picture, it's someone where like that's in construction or some sort of labor, right? That's like a high revenue industry, a high performance industry where, you know, you can build the business, you know, to 6, 7, 8 figures, maybe not 8, but 6 or 7 figures, let's just say, for example, to simplify things, through literally paper and pen and calls and letters, like everything non-digital. If you can do it that way, chances are having someone like me on board to design digital processes and automate everything, I can transform your entire business, you know, like just absolutely just flip it on its head, essentially, right? And what that does, no, it doesn't take away jobs. Yes, it does automate a lot of jobs, but it allows the customer to then redistribute, you know, the workforce. So say, for example, if they didn't have any of this automation, so let me get out of this so you can see my beautiful, beautiful face. If they didn't have any automations, or they did everything through like manual labor, through pen and paper, post-it notes, all of this stuff, right? Or even just simple like software like, you know, the Microsoft Suite or whatever it is, right? There's so much opportunity there to transform the business through, you know, automating everything, introducing new systems, vibe coding, you know, an intranet or a front end, or vibe coding a phone app, you know, like for geofencing clock-ins, you know, like there's so many ideas, right? Like all of you out there who are vibe coding, you know, if you've done it for a bit, you sort of understand what's possible with vibe coding. But the problem is, even if you develop something that like is fully bulletproof, right, and super secure, how are you going to take that to market, right? Because you've probably spent like X amount on developing everything, but then you'll quickly come to realize that, oh shit, you know, I got to do marketing and sales now. As with everything else, you know, it's not just vibe coding. This happened to me back in the day when I first started with photography, you know, like I've said in the past episodes. I got really cool, like good at taking photos. You know, I was producing really awesome stuff, you know, between fashion, music videos, weddings, all of that, blah, 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 you know, granted. But prior to me booking to all of those jobs, it was all just passion projects. And I was going out there working for free, right? If you've seen my other videos, the first 5 years was basically for free. That was the sales process for me. And the marketing was just like right place, right time. So it's not predictable, it's not controllable, but I made sure that I was, you know, at places where something could spawn randomly, and then I would be like, hey, I'll work for free. So the sales skills wasn't there because I was offering it for free, but it would allow me to go through the business process and go through the rest, which is delivering the service, providing the value, you know, checking on the ops, checking on the finance. Well, there was no finances back then, so you can skip that as well. But essentially that took me through the business process, right? And that's what's missing with the problem today with all these vibe coders. They're spawning like left, right, and center. There's so many, it's insane. Like I only just joined one Facebook group. I think it's called Vibe Coding is Life. And every day there's like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 posts about, hey, I just developed this app, blah, blah, blah. Could you check it out? La, 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 and all this crap, right? And all this technical jargon and everything looks crazy. And I'm sure most of these apps are really cool, but everyone's missing the point here. You can brag all you want about vibe coding, but if you don't know how to market and sell your product, you're essentially screwed, right? Because you can spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, right? And the worst part is, you know, if you don't know that you're getting into business, like it's just going to fly right over your head. You're just going to go back to a 9 to 5 or go back working somewhere else or totally drop the project altogether. And then it's just like, what was that for? Right. But for the people who do want to make a difference, you got to understand that you're getting into business. You'll need to start like a startup, essentially, right? You need to develop like all these other skills that you're probably not good at to get it to a certain point where you actually generate some revenue. And if you're doing like low ticket, high volume, that's another story in itself. I'm not an expertise in that field. I am trying to start in that field now with the academy that I'm building. Essentially what I'm trying to, well, not really, I'm sort of like medium ticket, high volume. Ideally, right? Medium ticket, any volume, right, is where I'm at right now. So that's another sort of thing that I'm going to explore. And if you do follow along with me, I will, let you know how I go with everything as well, because I do have the means to actually develop and build something out. And I have the capacity to fail along the way. So I'm not too bothered by it, because my bread and butter is currently what I'm doing, which is consulting for enterprise companies, which is high ticket, low volume, right? I'm good at that. I can talk about that all day. Anyways, going back to the topic, vibe coding. If I were to give like instant advice for people who are dead serious about it, again, marketing and sales, right? I think if you're fixated on what you've built, right, that's all well and great, but chances are it's just like every other person going through entrepreneurship, going through the startup phase. Your first thing that you want to do, like especially in my experience, chances are that's probably not going to be what's going to make you money, right? There's old articles where it's like 90% of startups fail, right? That's already a big thing, right? So if you consider that in itself, right? And then further along, it's like you're already in that, and then you have to compound it with all these other things, right? Like how well and good you learn marketing and sales, like your personal development, like has so much more to it, right? What I would advise is that everything that you've done, right, consider it a portfolio item, right? Consider it a passion project. Get out there and actually find people with issues that need solving, right? Now, I always go back to Upwork, because every time literally I go live, not live, but every time I make one of these videos and I literally pop into Upwork, I do it blind. I'll do it right now. Hang on a sec, I just need to log in. Here it is here, using Arc browser, the best browser. Every time I log into this, and you've probably seen it before if you actually watched. So my account here is geared towards, obviously what I do with project management, specifically around Monday, Zapier and all that stuff, and literally just scrolling here. The first one, Trello or Monday.com consultant. Like these are real jobs, right? The sort of analogy I'm trying to make here is that you need to, and I don't know if it is, but chances are it is, if you gear your Upwork towards, app development, right? You will probably find things here. So what I'm trying to get at is that everything that you've done now, right? Like I said, make that your portfolio, and then find places like Upwork where you can find people with problems already. And then it's like, if you've done enough work on your bloody passion projects, the chances of you actually being able to solve these problems are probably very likely. Granted, you are going to compete with people all over the world, which is okay. But look, just enough time and enough energy spent into this, and if you keep, putting yourself into it and commit to it, you will eventually win a job, right? And if you're doing anything like me, the first one will be free, right? That'll grab their attention. And then, the cool thing about, the tech industry is that if you do give them like a free demo or a free gig for the first job, there will be updates. You want to find, like for me, like I call them dinosaurs, where it's like, again, like what I said before, it's like they got the money, they know about tech, they don't want to build it, they know how to use it, right? For me, even if I did give out the first job, chances are, they're going to see who I am, they're going to understand how I work, they can understand that I can bring their dreams or their vision to reality, and then naturally I'll just get more work, right? And even if you don't, right, at least you have a literal real case study or extra things added to your portfolio for the next gig. And not only that, just keep in mind that whilst you're going through this process, you are going to fail, right? Especially if you just started. There's a whole sales process in here that you're trying to learn, right? This is the marketing component in the sense where it's pretty cool because it's almost like half inbound, right? What I mean by inbound is that these people are coming to Upwork with problems, posting all the information. Like literally, we dive into this, right? They've literally got a brief that as hot as a lead can be, right? And they've got everything displayed, like how much they spend, how much they pay per average, where they are, blah, 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 all of that jazz, right? And with, being in tech, you can be remote, right? We're in 2026 now. COVID was a blessing. Everyone can work remote now. I work remote, literally, full time on my own thing, right? That's the kicker though. Like you got to have your own business, right? If you don't, then it's like you got to work for a company that allows it, which is not that typical, right? As a business owner, you can do whatever the heck you want. But in saying that, this solves the marketing part of it because yes, you might pay for some credits here and there, but it's so much more better than actually learning how to market, learning how to do marketing, building a website, running ads, building a funnel, doing all this jazz just to get good at marketing, right? And then it's just like, fuck, I've spent so much money on that just to get clients. Yes, you can do that, absolutely. But if time is of the essence and if you actually want to get that first invoice paid, there are quicker ways to do things. You got to go through other sort of avenues, right? And I find Upwork is really good because literally Upwork was the platform that got me out of full-time, right? I managed to actually find clients on here, I don't know how, that were willing to pay me the rates that I was, putting up here. And it's a lot higher than 32, I'll tell you that much. But for me, it was like needle in a haystack thing because it was high ticket, low volume. So it didn't matter to me that I would get rejected from clients that, want to pay less. If they want to pay less, then they're not looking for quality and value. And that's absolutely fine with me, right? But at the same time, I was shooting myself in the foot because it was like, I need money to do this transition, but I made it. I made it, people, I made it. But anyways, this is what I used to do, These days, I'm trying new methods where I'm running Facebook ads and they're quite expensive, but they find me leads so much more faster than Upwork. So once you do create some capital and then you want to spend more on marketing, that's where I would say, okay, now let's actually dive into digital marketing. Let's actually pay for ads and build something on, on your own, for your own thing. And yes, it is ultimately more expensive, but then you can control a lot more things, right? Because here it's all, like even if you do apply for it, you don't know who they are, right? Yeah, cool, where they're from, but you don't necessarily get like an email or something. And even if you do apply, right, the only downside to this is that it's up to them if they want to respond or not. It's up to them if they want to, fire up a meeting with you. And if you do get the chance, like that's where I'm like, bro, you gotta get their email. As soon as you get the email, you get the domain. As soon as you get the domain, you get their website, their address, you get everything, right? Their number and everything. And that's then up to you to do your due diligence to actually go through the sales process and follow up and call them and do all of that jazz and just go through that process to get the damn job, right? But in saying that, let's look at the traffic here, right? In terms of leads, 1, 2, 3. I don't even know what tax time is, but you can figure this shit out very quickly with AI. There's so many. And what are these? Yesterday, 3 hours ago, yesterday, 3 hours ago. Like this is real stuff that I'm showing you. Like this is not a TikTok bloody clout chasing scam BS, right? This is real shit, right? This is what got me through, and yeah, so if you don't know marketing, like that was my decision back then. It's like, I don't have time to actually go into marketing, even though I knew so many people in marketing that were doing so well. For me, it's like, I learned the important lesson of focusing on what I do best, which means do not go out and learn everything. Find alternatives to sort of fast track your way there. And Upwork was one of them for me, right? Granted, has its ups, has its downs, but then it was better off for me in the long run because I didn't need to learn digital marketing. I would just pay this platform, I don't know how much, I didn't pay that much to be honest, to just get one lead in, one lead was the difference that I needed. And then try to find another one. And not only that, like there's groups that you can join on Facebook where if you find the right group, you just need to be active every day, just check it and just respond to these people, get their attention, try to get their emails, right? Once you get the emails, the numbers, whatever, your foot's in the door. Then from there, it's just do your due diligence, right? Go through the process, nurture, right? Even get GPT to help you out. Like take it with a grain of salt. Don't literally believe everything that it says. But the more you do feed it, the more generally good information that it gives you, right? But at the same time, I think for me personally, don't forget to be a human being, right? I'm not saying like be emotional about everything, but like be generally positive, generally happy, right? But also in your follow-up procedures, make sure you're just rigid. Something about sales, like a long time ago, when I first started, even before I first started my business, before 21, I always thought salespeople were sharks. This was the thing that I had in my head, and the more I progressed and developed as an entrepreneur, as a solopreneur, as a business owner, whatever you want to call it, I realized that sales was such an essential part to running a business because literally that's where the money starts, right? Well, not really. Marketing is where the leads start. Sales is where the contract closes or the deal closes and the money process begins, right? But this whole image that I had in my head of salesmen are sharks, right? It quickly changed over time. What I realized is that association I created was from bad salespeople. The best salespeople, and I hope you probably have experienced this yourself as a customer, the best salespeople, they make you feel like it wasn't even a sales process. The best salespeople have like literally zero friction when they sell, right? Almost like they were doing you a favor. Actually, literally, right? The best ones provide you value, do you a favor, and then you're happy and willing to actually pay for whatever they're selling, right? Like, I don't know if this is the best analogy, but imagine like your friend, like one of your good friends, they referred you to a product, and they were the middleman to selling it to you, right? Like that experience, if it's coming from a good friend, that should be similar to what a good salesperson should be, right? Now, don't quote me on that, right? I'm just trying to make an analogy here to get you to understand that if you're in that little spot that I was in a long time ago, where it's like salespeople are shy, I don't want to do sales because it's so ugly, this and that, blah, 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 right? There's such a negative connotation for people who don't know sales, right? And the worst part is that people who do get into sales, if they don't have the right personality and they're like ego-driven and like they're just not the right fit, but they stay in the industry for like 10, 20, 30 years and they just have this sour taste to them, they're always going to be like that. And the worst part is these people, some of them make enough to just survive. That's the worst part, right? And the best salespeople that I've met, my God, they do 6-7 figures. It's crazy. And it's like, they're just super happy and they're super positive and they literally help people every day. They don't sell to people, they help people. That's the key difference here, right? That's the major difference, right? Now, let's not get into that too much. But essentially, it's something that you do need to understand, that you do need to learn as a skill, right? Vibe coding is one thing. Generating value for your customer is something else that has vibe coding included, can be, right? Really, this video is about if you are interested in vibe coding, then you need to understand how to create a business around that. For me, I did the reverse, and I think that's the better way to do it. That's the better way to do it. You need to figure out what value you want to provide first, and then if vibe coding is included, then great, right? Naturally, with what I do, when it comes to like, so let's go back to the screen share. When it comes to Monday, there isn't vibe coding involved here, right? Not so much. But when it does touch like Zapier, when, say for example, hang on. Okay, say for example, like when I'm in Zapier, right? Obviously not this example, but then you can add like code steps to, your automations. So say for example in here, just move the mic. If I do add a code step here, instead of doing like default stuff that Zapier has, I can plug in JavaScript And I remember when I first did this, I literally learned JavaScript in a week through ChatGPT. So in GPT, you know, like I would go into GPT and then pretty much explain the process that I want to do in step 2. So say, for example, this is coming from like one of my academy examples, new form response, and then create an item in Monday. So this was a lead intake form, right? So super simple stuff. When somebody submits a form on Google, then create an item in Monday. But say, for example, let's say if we have a global marketing acquisition setup, right, where we're getting people from all over the world, everyone's going to have, let's say, a different time zone, therefore a different time. And if they're all going to one Monday account, say, for example, this Monday is based in Italy, then I would like to perhaps convert all of the times in this code step to process that and then chuck it into Monday, right? As an example, right? Probably doesn't make sense, but I'm just saying, as an example, when you do have certain things where instead of doing like 5 or 10 steps in Zapier, you can do one step, vibe coding it, right? So yeah, that's an example of how vibe coding sort of came into my processes, right? Not necessarily starting with it. So yeah, again, like going back to how you actually start a career vibe coding, that is one example, right? Another example is, you know, if you are creating an app, right, a web app or an app specifically, that would be to latch on to current systems that, you know, customers have, because 9.9 times out of 10, if you do actually find a customer, it is someone who already has something set up and then you're there to enhance it, right? That's most of the times for me. The other times where you actually do find a customer where it's like they're venturing into, you know, a new business or they're doing an overhaul, it's not that frequent to me, even though it does happen. But the issue with that is the sales process is much more intense, because you'll probably be competing with all these other people that probably charge more than you. Like some are doing retainers or someone just doing crazy hourlies. But in saying that, like I almost find those jobs are too crazy, because for what I do, like it's in iterations, where it's like every 2 weeks, you know, or every week there needs to be updates, and every 2 weeks, you know, at least minimum we'll have a meetup to actually discuss updates, and it's like a rolling work in progress, right? Whereas, you know, for those ones, it's more like they want the whole thing in one go, but it's technically not possible, because you got to test so many things, you know. It could be like a business that's trying to exit or sell, and, you know, for me, it's like improve their system so it improves their valuation, right, overall. It's just all this crap. Like vibe coding, even though vibe coding in itself is not fully related to what I do, there is things that cross over. So if you are, you know, looking to do vibe coding, like if you want to have a chit chat with me, I will show you what I do and why vibe coding is involved, right? So ideally, right, what I'm trying to get at is you need to obviously find what sort of value you're providing for a customer, right? And then build that for them, right? And I've given you a few examples, but the thing is, what I'm trying to get at is don't get fixated on your passion project, because that's a passion project for you, right? It's not for anybody else but you, right? And if you do go down the other avenue of like high volume and you want to create an app, say for example, like I created a fasting app for myself, you know, which is cool for myself. It works beautifully for me, you know, and I've sent it to a couple of friends, but they don't use it as much as I do because whatever, right? All I'm saying is that avenue is a whole different ball game, and I can't advise you on anything of that sort of world. But what I do know and what I do want to pass on to you is obviously what I am and what I've said. So enough bloody rambling, right? So what I want to sort of cap off the video today with is that it's not that easy, right? And a lot of the traditional full stack devs are probably laughing at you because you think, are you going to break into the industry? But I have made it through, right? And I wouldn't call myself a full stack dev traditionally, but definitely a full stack vibe coder. That's for sure. Because I've learned how to do front end. I already came from, a business that provided the full back end, right? Through Monday, through Zap, and like whatever else the client was using. Because typically that would come with like a niche platform that their industry uses or that their company uses, right? And then I would help automate their back end. And for the front end, they probably didn't have one, right? And then I developed that with them. So that's where the vibe coding comes in sort of really hard when a company doesn't have a front end or an intranet, right? That's where, for me personally, it comes in really, really hard. But yeah, that's pretty much it for today. If you're in the tech field, I'd definitely, let you know that you probably have to have a sit down and a think about, how much more deeper you want to get into this, because essentially you do have to become some form of a business owner, right? Or, if you've done enough passion projects, hopefully you could land a job. I don't know. I haven't really done that, so I can't really say. But technically, yes, it is possible if you've done enough. People are looking for vibe coders these days, which is quite funny. But typically, they'll be in a team that's backed with someone that actually has proper experience, right? Not to say that you can't get experience at vibe coding. I think the beautiful part of vibe coding for me is that I've got all this technical knowledge about businesses, right? And then, it makes me a good communicator to AI to actually develop systems, right? I think that in itself will separate me from every other vibe coder, right? Because I know exactly what business owners want. I know what they think. I know what they need. So when we do sort of create relations, right? For me, the hardest part is actually the first part where it's like acquisition and then starting the first job, right? But everything after that, they quickly realize that, he knows how to absorb information. He knows what to think about, what to ask. And like when there is a problem, I literally stop them and say, hey, I don't understand this. This is what I think about logically in the process. Can you confirm that we're on the same page? And then they will explain like technically, deep things within the industry in layman's to then get it across to me, and then I'll translate that into a system or whatever the heck it is. Anyways, I'm rambling on. What I wanted to do was actually cap this episode with showing a bit of the academy. So for all of you that don't care about, what I do, that's pretty much it for you today. But for everyone interested in what I'm actually building, this new business venture of mine, if you are in tech, if you're interested in software automation, then let's chit chat for the next 5 to 10 minutes. Alrighty, so let us begin. So what I'm trying to build here, right, and it's still sort of in the works. I do have the initial course out literally right now. The whole first module is free. You literally sign up at academy.5mconsulting.com.au. That's the link right there. I'll put the link in the description. But essentially here I teach you how to utilize monday.com, utilize Zapier, and a bit of GraphQL and a bit of JSON. And essentially what this teaches you is literally how to do what I do, and then, be able to actually go onto Upwork and actually pitch to these jobs, right? So for all the people out there who, like, you've done a bit of vibe coding but you're not sure, you actually want to make money, this is a quick way to actually get to a point where you actually make some money, right? I do, like, everything is still in the works, but the first course or program is free. I'm still up in the air with naming things. I have called it the Academy. But essentially this starter will take you through enough information where, you'll be able to open up a Monday account. You'll be able to go beyond the basic integrations. You'll be able to connect it to Zapier, which then gives you so much, because then you can solve a lot of problems where it's like, there are companies out there using Monday, but they're sort of limited to what Monday provides. So they're sort of bottlenecked with their automations. That's where it's like, oh, you can purchase Zapier and then we can do it. So there's already a lot of skills in here that you develop that allows you to, communicate with companies to open up their bottlenecks in terms of like software automation, right? So if I were to go back into here, like just to show you sort of some of the crap that's going on in here. So it is heavily like a textbook type of situation here. I do want to introduce videos up top, now that I am making videos on YouTube, but I haven't done that just yet. Everything's sort of just a work in progress. But what I think is quite cool that everything is sort of, whatchamacallit, I want to say dynamic, interactive in the sense where you learn something called API keys and it literally checks your work. So once you do develop, like once you create your, and everything's free, by the way, with Monday, Zapier and all that stuff. So you can actually, you don't need to pay for the platforms. Like I've made sure that every platform that I do include here is actually free and actually works. So you don't need to pay anything on top to actually get things going. So I just made it super interactable because what happens is I want to put people in a situation where they can actually do this course and they actually have enough literal hands-on experience where they get their reps in and they actually do the work so that when you actually, get to this point where you start pitching on Upwork, you literally have a requirement for them to actually have these softwares purchased so that when you do get access, you don't need to pay for anything. You just need to dive in. If it's your first job, dive in, get access, go into their accounts, and then you have fully paid versions from these companies. So then you can do whatever you want, right? Because naturally, if you do watch my videos, I have two ways to approach these clients, which is live or async. Live, I wouldn't recommend until you get a lot better, but async gives you such a big window in the sense of you can mess around with their accounts for as long as you need to get it right? And obviously charge them for what you think is right. Because if you're doing something for the first time and you haven't done it before, then I would recommend that you do actually spend your own time to actually get things going and then charge them a decent, normal rate for what you've done. Don't overcharge them for BS, right? Because that's how you lose clients, because they will feel it. But anyways, like academy.5mconsulting.com.au, you literally sign up. The first one's free. I think I might put out a promo code to just release everything else. We'll see how it goes. If I actually get traction on this, just drop me a comment, say release the rest of the course. If I get enough people to actually want to release the rest of the course, I'll throw it out there for everyone up into here. So basically, you learn the foundations of systems thinking. You learn Monday. You learn the automations within Monday, so the inbuilt stuff, and that already takes you a long way. And then you learn GraphQL basics, so that's when we jump into like Zapier. And then you learn how to diagnose all this jazz. And then literally ship a system. Very easy to say. I wouldn't say long to do. I think if you commit time to it, you will actually get through a lot. It is quite like brain heavy in the sense of like if you've never done this before, but if you're in the tech field, I think things will like click on very quickly where it's like, cool, right? For the people in the tech world, I think what's beautiful about this is once you've finished or as you're going through it, you'll start to understand how I think when I'm talking to clients. You'll start to understand how systems can actually all connect together, right? The whole point of this is to give you the skill set where you're able to diagnose companies, right, in the terms of like looking at their systems and then knowing where to automate things, right? Now, I'm not going to yap on too long. I think we'll cap it here, but essentially, this is pretty much it. This is the baby that I'll be working on for the next however long. There's exams as well within it and then module checks at the end. So you actually, actually have to do some questions and answers. But yeah, a lot of text heavy stuff. The only thing is it's very practical in the sense of, you go on your own. So I am sort of throwing you in the deep end. The cool thing is that when you do the API verification, it actually guides you. So yeah, interactive, like I said. Yeah, that's pretty much it for today. Thank you for watching. Last week, man, Friday, I left with 100 subs, and over the weekend I got another 100, and I was like, what the heck? Still haven't got any comments. I put a promo out for $1. Obviously, people are not going to comment to get $1 because it's just $1. But I will leave that there. Maybe I'll up the ante as I go. 1,000 subs, $10. That's probably still not going to warrant anything because I guess the numbers are so low. But hey, it is what it is. If you are watching and you are at this point of time within the video, thank you so much. I highly do appreciate it. I will continue to post videos and just yap on about more stuff of me in the tech world and what I do, and yeah, essentially get on this journey to help others, you know, create a lifestyle like I did. You know, that's the goal of the academy. That's what I want to do. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching. Hope you had enough of my voice, and I will see you in the next video.